Welcome to the cutting edge of the global awakening.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence by the military-industrial complex.
Well, it looks like the North Tower of the World Trade Center has just completely collapsed.
The U.S. dollar's status as the preeminent reserve currency is under attack.
This is a mathematical fact. Tens of trillions of dollars are being extracted from the United States of America.
You really want the truth? Then just follow the money.
Welcome to Follow the Money Radio, a broadcast dedicated to your personal, spiritual, and financial liberty. And now, here's your voice of reason in the midst of global chaos, economist and best-selling author, Jerry Robinson.
Greetings, friends. Welcome to Follow the Money Weekly Radio. So glad that you're joining us on the web at FTMDaily.com every single day, right in your inbox. If you sign up for our FTM Daily Briefing, we've been getting a lot of responses from many of you about the daily briefing and how much it's helping you analyze and understand what's happening out there and really cutting through all the noise. You know how much noise is in the media? You really have to leave the country to really understand how loud this media machine really is. I mean, there is so much going on. And in fact, every single day here in our office, as we put together what we feel is the most pressing news for you and put it into our daily briefing and put it up on our website and put it on the email and blast it out to you, we are faced with that noise. We're faced with all of these, and really, you know what much of it is? It's just press releases. All of these different corporations come out with either a hit piece on somebody else, or they are trying to promote one of their products, and so they're using an angle in the news to really play it up. So half of the news, probably more than half, probably 75% of all of the things that are classified as news that you see on a daily basis are nothing more than glorified press releases. It's just corporations trying to mold your mind to believe a certain way or believe a certain thing, or it's a politician's press release trying to get you to support a certain kind of idea. So that way, whenever the bill comes up, you'll be supportive of it. I mean, it's just all press releases. That's really what much of this is. There's really only a little bit of handful of news that comes out on a daily basis. And that's what we try to focus on here at Follow the Money. We try to focus on the things that really matter to you. And you know what really matters right now? No matter what is in the press, no matter what they're saying, no matter what you're hearing on the TV, doesn't matter. What really, really, really is important today are very few things. Number one, for an American investor, I should say. If you're on the other side of the world, you know, there's different things, obviously, for you. But I'm talking right now predominantly to U.S. investors. The NSA, okay? The NSA is a very big deal. Now, it may not be big to you. It may not be big in your world. You may not be thinking about it a lot. You may just see headlines occasionally. But let me tell you, around the world, it's a big deal, okay? If you found out, for example, you're living in the U.S., if you found out that China was spying on your internet, and spying on your email, and was spying on President Obama, and was spying on our politicians, and was spying on, your phone calls, and had content from, I mean, you would be a little upset, I would hope. I would hope you would be a little upset. Maybe you wouldn't. Maybe you wouldn't care. Maybe you think that's great. That seems to be what the case is today. Nobody seems to care about this NSA thing. I think they're having a rally today out in Washington, D.C., right there in Washington, D.C., and I saw the list of names who were there, and I'm not, trying to be rude or anything, but they didn't really have anybody that was a game changer. Maybe I didn't see the lineup properly. Maybe I didn't see the whole thing. But from the names that I saw there, we were missing people. Where's the Tea Party right now, right? The Tea Party, blabbing about democracy, blabbing about freedom, blabbing about how they want, to have liberty, and yet they are fine with the TSA groping them in the airport. They're fine with the NSA listening to their phone calls. That's not liberty. That's not freedom. I seriously doubt that George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin would have stood by as England was spying on them. This is why I often compare, and I know this is controversial to say this, and I may regret saying this. I'm going to say it anyway. I really believe, and you may turn me off after I say this and never listen to me again, I don't know. But I'm going to tell you, I really believe Not based upon anything right now, but I'm talking 100 years in the future. Okay, 100 years in the future, I think this is what people are going to think. They're going to view Edward Snowden and Glenn Greenwald and these people who have been exposing this NSA mess in a favorable light. They're going to see them differently than we see them now. We're living in the middle of it, right? So there's all these different emotions and feelings, and what are we supposed to think? Is he a traitor? Is he not a traitor? Is Edward Snowden, does he belong in jail? All of those kinds of things are going through our minds. But I'm telling you, I really believe a century from now, we're not going to have that type of emotional connection to this. If the Lord tarries, and I believe that Jesus Christ is coming back. I believe in the second coming of Christ. I believe that all of this mess is going to be resolved only by God. I don't think that men can fix themselves. I don't think men can rule themselves. Never have, never will. So I'm not surprised necessarily by all of the chaos that we're seeing. But let's just say that I'm wrong, and let's say that we don't have a second coming of Christ over the next 100 years. Let's say I'm wrong. Okay, I believe it'll happen within the next 100 years. That's what I believe. Right? Everybody has their own belief. Let's say that does not happen. Well, I don't think 100 years from now people are going to be looking back and saying Edward Snowden was a jerk. Edward Snowden should have been put into an 8x8 cell, right? Edward Snowden should have been executed. I don't think they're going to think that in their minds. They're going to say, wow, there was somebody who stood up to the American empire and called them out, okay? Let's think about George Washington in his context. What do you think people thought about George Washington in England at the time, whenever he was rabble-rousing? What do you think they thought about the Founding Fathers? They probably didn't like them very much. They probably thought they were traitors. They were probably called traitors. In fact, we know they're called traitors because we have the evidence. You go back and read, you can read about what they thought about George Washington. Many people in the United States thought that George Washington and Thomas Jefferson were traitors to England for rebelling. Okay? But we don't look back at those people today and say, oh, we should have hung them all and we should have put them in jail. But they stood up against the British Empire and said, no more tyranny, no more. And they founded a brand new nation. Okay? I am thinking 100 years down the road, or maybe 200 years down the road, or maybe less. For me, it's right now. I don't view Edward Snowden as a criminal. I view the people in the White House. I view the people in Washington, D.C. as the criminals. To me, they're the ones who need to be put in jail, not Edward Snowden. Now, Edward Snowden probably handled this whole thing wrong. I don't know. I'm not going to. History will judge him on that. But I tell you what, these politicians who knew without a shadow of a doubt that you and I were being monitored and they refused to say anything, that's a big deal. That's a really big deal for a country who drapes itself in the words of freedom and democracy and talks about how it bombs other countries for freedom and democracy, to deliver freedom and democracy. I think that's going to backfire. Okay. And the other thing is we have not seen the elections fully play out on this whole thing yet. The world is angry. There's a report this morning, 21 nations have gone to the United Nations demanding some sort of redress to this. Give us a solution to this. Protect us from the United States. Isn't that crazy? I mean, normally when countries go to the UN, this over countries like Syria or Iraq, or they go to them over Iran, or maybe even, other countries as well, but not the United States. You don't see that very often. This shows you the depth of this NSA issue. It's deep. It cuts deep. And here's the other thing to keep in mind. These politicians like Angela Merkel and Francois Hollande, all these different guys, the guy running France and the lady running Germany, they all likely know about much of this stuff, right? They probably know the deal. They know the score. But here's the catch-22 they find themselves in. They cannot let on that to their people that they knew that the United States was spying on their email and spying on their phone calls. They have to throw their hands on their mouth and say, oh my gosh, we did not know that the U.S. was doing this to you. What are we going to do? So they have to play this way. Otherwise, their people will roll the guillotines out and let them have it. And you know what? In the past, that's exactly what happened to politicians whenever they got out of hand. They would roll the guillotine out into the middle of the square, and they would just bring them down and off with their heads. The French Revolution is the very first thing you think of. We don't see that today. The worst thing that can happen to a politician today is they don't get reelected. Oh. Then they just get a little job in the private sector through that revolving door, and they end up being a lobbyist, and they spend all of their PAC money on eating out and traveling the world and doing whatever else they do. Oh, what bless their hearts. Rarely do these guys go to jail. Rarely are they reprimanded. So they don't have any incentive to not destroy the vestiges of this democracy, because the only fear that they have is not being reelected. There are no repercussions for these guys. They don't end up in jail. So for a U.S. investor watching this, we have not seen the people of these other countries. We've already heard the Brazilian president get all upset. We already heard, Brazilian. Did I ever tell you my Brazil joke? I got to just give me a second. There was this was back in 2003. Bush had just went into Iraq, and they had help from other countries who were standing by and helping them, Britain and Brazil. And apparently there were about 3 Brazilian soldiers that were killed in a firefight in Baghdad back in 2003. And the chief of staff came to President Bush and said, President Bush, I've got some bad news. He says, I've got to tell you this. 3 Brazilian soldiers have been killed in Iraq today. And George Bush just puts his head in his hands. He said, oh, no. He said, how many are Brazilian? Oh, that's a bad joke. Brazilian as opposed to zillion or trillion or billion. Okay, maybe it's a bad joke. But anyway, point is, how did I get off track? The point is that U.S. investors need to keep their eye on this, because many of these countries, we've only seen the anger from the top of the food chain. We have not seen what the electorate, what the people are going to do, how this may change their voting patterns. They may support strongly anti-U.S. candidates from this point on. We don't know what kind of anger is going to rise and bubble forth to the top in these nations like Brazil and Mexico, a country that's just to the south of us, who are very angry right now because we're spying on them. This has got to play into your investment portfolio. This has to play into your mind, because this is going to carry severe repercussions. And we have not seen the repercussions from this yet. We're just in the beginning stages. And according to Glenn Greenwald over at The Guardian, who is publishing many of these documents from Edward Snowden that have been leaked, he says there are so many more to come, and many of them are going to be how the United States is targeting you. Targeting you. So there's even going to be an uprising here in the United States. We don't know how muted it'll be. We don't know how strong it'll be. But one thing is for sure, the government has overreached. And this needs to be a part of your investment plan. You've got to think about this going forward. You've got to be very cautious. We have not seen the fallout from this yet. So that's number one. Number two, thing we have to keep our eyes on, and you probably saw this all week long, was the topic of Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is the linchpin for the United States dollar because of the petrodollar system. They're the ones who originated with Henry Kissinger back in the 70s, this idea that we'll sell all of our oil in dollars and you provide us military support, and you serve as our mercenary in the Middle East. And so in exchange for that, we have this demand for dollars. Pretty soon all these other countries jumped on the boat, and so we have this now, and it creates a demand for the dollar. Well, we have this very angry world at the United States right now. We have China calling for a de-Americanization of the world, calling for a new international currency. And now you have the Saudis publicly and very visibly upset with the United States. And we'll provide some analysis on that later in the program today. But that is something else that you need to keep your eyes on as an investor. These global events really matter. They really matter. And they'll impact the type of sectors and the type of industries that you want to invest in and the countries that you want to invest in. So hopefully here at our organization, what we do is we monitor those things and we try to provide you the very best information so that you can invest and you can protect your assets and protect your family from whatever this fallout might be. We don't know. Now, just a couple of other random notes. By the way, just so you know, we have a great show lined up for you today. We have Jay Peroni. He's going to be here with an investing idea of the week. We got Tom Cloud going to deliver his precious metals market update. Jennifer's going to be here with some information on health savings accounts, which you definitely want to pay attention to if you're a business owner. But also, she's also going to be here with our trigger trade report. But there's another story I wanted to tell you about real quickly before we go to our first break, and that is on November 1st, and I don't have the details in front of me, but we've already reported on this week, but we're going to report on it again next week, that food stamps are being reduced because the stimulus plan that was put into place underneath Barack Obama is coming to an end November 1st. Therefore, according to the reports I've seen, the average food stamp recipient is going to receive a reduction in their monthly amount by about $36. Doesn't sound like a lot to you or me, but if you're on food stamps, $36 means, 4 chickens or, I don't know, $36 buys you quite a bit, especially if you have a lot of kids. So my point is that we don't know what the fallout from that's going to be, right? There's all these uncertainties, and the market hates uncertainty. So we keep our eyes on these things, and we are very cautious of them. Overall, I want to tell you, we put out a report this week for all of our FTM insiders called Charting Europe, showing the massive returns that have been experienced by many of the European countries over the last several months. Europe, in many ways, if the NSA leaks continue to barrage the U.S., and play down Europe. Europe is going to be a primary beneficiary out of all of this. And by the way, the European stock market is undervalued currently as compared to the United States. So there's a lot of big money flowing over there. And we provided our FTM insiders with our favorite ways to play that using different ETFs in that recent report. If you're not an FTM insider, you want to become one, you simply go to our website, ftmdaily.com/subscribe. You get our daily trading idea that's in our daily briefing. You also get our newsletter that's, by the way, coming out this weekend. We have it all finalized and prepped, and it's going to be released really quickly, so you should be receiving it in your email any day now. You receive our market conditions alert, the whole 9 yards. Go to ftmdaily.com/subscribe and learn more about that. Let's head over now to our precious metals market update. Let's get an update on gold and silver.
Follow the Money Weekly presents your precious metals market update. Here's Tom Cloud.
The economic data that came out this week has been very favorable to gold, and we're now seeing gold, as I record this, back up in the 1340s and looking like it's going to go much higher. As we talked about last week, the fallout from the Republicans giving in to the Democrats in every way and absolutely gaining nothing from it now has the markets real sheepish to the upside for inflation, money creation, since Obama now has the ability to create without having to go through Congress or Senate. It takes 2/3 vote to stop anything that he does between now and February the 7th. We're waiting on news out of China, as we have carefully monitored for you, the listeners, as Jerry has for a couple of years, myself too, is when will China be ready to assume the petrodollar. And we're seeing that picking up at a fast rate as we've seen 3 more countries now doing payment in the yuan, the currency, and we're continuing to see China buy gold and accumulate at these very cheap prices because they know that based on money creation of the past 12 months, meaning money supply growth, even in China, especially in Japan, the United States, and the Eurozone, with all those countries exceeding 20% already, and we're only 10 months not even 10 months into the year. So certainly if you create 22% more U.S. dollars out of thin air, it's going to eventually affect the U.S. dollar, and you're going to see it drop. And we seem to think that next year, 2014, will be the year that gold has probably its biggest jump, possibly, the last 12-year cycle. We've had 1 year at 33%. But the other big news this week has been the breakout by silver picking up a little momentum. We saw the ratio go back to 60 to 1, where gold was 60 times more valuable than silver. And now we see where it's down to 59. So we've seen silver over the past week pick up a little momentum. And everything we're seeing, especially as the U.S. Mint continues to have a torrid pace of creating silver eagles, and even though they're only about a week behind, it could go backwards at any time. Next week, Jerry and I will be doing an interview as I'm at a meeting with a lot of gold and silver wholesalers, talking about the future of the physical markets and what we can expect going forward, getting physical in our hands and what it might look like, and try to get some real figures, what's going from the west to the east. So as I record this, I am out of town, and we'll be back in my office on Monday, and hopefully next week we'll be able to give you a good interview on what's going on the supply side. We talk a lot about fundamentals, and we talk a lot about technical analysis, but we don't talk much about the supply side. What are the miners saying? Are the miners cranking up? Are the miners cutting back? Are the miners making a profit? Are the people like Johnson, Matthey, and Engelhard, are they able to get enough silver in the pipeline to take orders? All these kind of things are very crucial to you, the investor, in this area, but it's something we just don't have an opportunity to talk about very often. But next week we will have that, and hopefully y'all will tune in for it. But this week we got quite a good bounce with the economic data coming out earlier in the week. So if any of you need to talk to me, you can reach me at 800-247-2812. That's 800-247-2812. If you're not signed up for our free email blast, you can go to FTMDaily.com and hit the precious metals button, and you can sign up. And it is a confidential list. We don't share it with anyone, but we try to send you out a couple, 2 or 3 pertinent email blasts a week on things we have on special, what we hear from other experts, and what they see happening. But we really think what we've been talking about in next year is the year. All indications are is that Obama will print tremendous amounts of money between now and February. The Chinese are getting close to taking the petrodollar over. It could easily happen next year. And even if it doesn't, the dollar will continue to lose purchasers of its precious treasury bills, and that would drive interest rates up. We still think the dollar will fall as the dollar is liquidated. With this week's Precious Metals Market Update, this is Tom Cloud signing out.
Hey friends, this is Jerry Robinson from Follow the Money Weekly. Recently, we have been receiving many emails from our listeners commenting on the great help they're getting from our precious metals expert, Tom Cloud. Gold and silver are excellent hedges against the growing threat of coming U.S. inflation. Who's your gold guy? Make it Tom Cloud. With over 30 years' experience with precious metals, Tom will answer all of your questions. Don't buy your gold and silver through some call center and pay inflated prices. Call my good friend Tom Cloud and speak directly with him and get all of your questions answered. For a limited time, Tom is offering free shipping and insurance on every gold and silver purchase made by our listeners. Call 800-247-2812. And when you do, tell him that Jerry Robinson from Follow the Money Weekly sent you, and he'll throw in that free shipping and insurance on your entire order. Call your gold guy, Tom Cloud, right now for the very best deals on gold and silver coins. 800-247-2812. That is 800-247-2812. Hi friends, Jerry Robinson here. Many of you know that I have been running several successful online businesses for years. And one of the things that I like about doing business online is that it's cheap. In fact, anyone can get started simply by purchasing a domain name and a web hosting plan. But how exactly do you get started? Well, just go where I go, dirtcheapwebhosting.net. That's right, dirtcheapwebhosting.net. It does not matter what you're looking for because they have it all. Domain names as low as $1.99. Web hosting plans as low as $3.99 per month. And you can even start your own online store for as little as $9.99 per month. And if you need help building your own website, just use their free design wizard and you can be up and running in no time with your very own beautifully designed website. Friends, it's time to get online. Start a blog, start an online business, start something. Log on now to dirtcheapwebhosting.net and get your own website set up right now for just a few dollars per month. dirtcheapwebhosting.net. Everything you need to get started online, only cheaper.
With this week's Trigger Trade Report, I'm Jennifer Robinson. This week was a slower week in the trigger trading portfolio, as one stock was in play, ticker symbol KORS, and is still in play, down from the trigger of 1.14%, but of course, we hope to see that bounce back next week. 5 of our stocks are still awaiting Jerry's trigger price. Now, a trigger price is what we call an alarm. It's not the same thing as a buy price. When the trigger price is reached, that means the stock is worth watching at that time. Usually, the trigger price is a point of resistance for the stock, as we do technical analysis every single day on many stocks. So if the stock breaks through to the high side of the trigger price, then it may very well continue higher. For example, this week, ticker symbol ABFS reached its trigger price on Friday, but then it dropped down 1.8% during the remainder of the trading day. The stock did not go above its trigger price, but rather reached it, and like a ceiling, it just kept dropping lower after that. I hope this short tutorial has been helpful to all of our trigger traders out there who receive Jerry's Trade of the Day as part of our FTM Insider membership. You can learn more at ftmdaily.com/trigger trade.
Jay Peroni, Certified Financial Planner, here with the idea of the week. This week we'll take a look at a pro-big government stock that should continue to soar under Obama's watch. With government spending still on everyone's mind, this red-hot government services stock should continue to outperform the market. When you hear the words government and efficiency, they're hardly used in the same sentence. With government shutdowns, debt ceiling showdowns, and another heated battle brewing just months away, now is a great time to look at a company that specializes in operations program management and consultant services to government and government agencies. Now, the biggest challenge in government is not fixing the mess, but rather just trying to get accurate, timely information on where federal funds dollars are actually going. No one within government or outside truly has a full and complete understanding of how the federal government spends money. As government gets larger, it becomes more inefficient. David Mastrin saw this firsthand after years of schooling at West Point, Stanford University, and George Washington University, and then a 7-year tour as an Air Force veteran. He served in Vietnam. He got a glimpse of how inefficient government could be. As an employee at the United States Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, David managed contracts and grants for social welfare programs. He became frustrated when he was unable to find a private company that understood welfare programs well enough to help the government instill efficiency, so he quit his job and sought out to fill a void. In 1975, following a short stint working for a consulting firm of Arthur Young, David founded a company with $12,000 of capital. As he began working out of his home, his mission became making government more efficient. In 1997, his company went public, and it had a rough go for many years. When Obama took office in 2009, shares adjusted for splits stood at just $8.64. Since that time, shares have skyrocketed to almost $50 a share, an amazing run of 475% in under 5 years. With 3 years still left in Obama's second term, the real party is just beginning. The company I'm referring to is Maximus Incorporated, ticker symbol MMS. Maximus basically is in the business of providing outsourcing services to government health and human services agencies. It does the administrative work for Medicaid, the Children's Health Insurance Program, healthcare reform, Welfare to Work, Medicare, child support enforcement, and a host of other government programs. It has two divisions, the Health Services segment, which offers business process outsourcing and administrative support services, as well as consulting services for state and federal programs such as Medicaid, Medicare, and the British Columbia Health Insurance Program. It also has a Human Services segment that provides various business process outsourcing, case management, job training, and support services. The bottom line, Maximus, ticker symbol MMS, is a good buy up to $60 a share. This one should hit $80 to $100 over the next 12 to 18 months with an increased demand for business process outsourcing services. Maximus provides services to the United States, Australia, Canada, and the United Kingdom. It's well diversified and in a high-demand industry during this time of fiscal crisis. So again, that one's Maximus Incorporated, ticker symbol MMS, worth a closer look. This is Jay Peroni, Certified Financial Planner, signing off for the Idea of the Week. We'll see you again next week.
All right. Well, Jay Peroni is a CFP, Certified Financial Planner, a member of our Christian Financial Advisor Network, and he also manages our very own PACE investment portfolio. If you would like to have a free 30-minute review of your investments with Jay, you can call him at 888-664-6963. That's 888-664-6963. And when you do, be sure to tell him you heard about him on Follow the Money Weekly Radio.
According to a newly leaked NSA memo written halfway through George W. Bush's second term, the U.S. has monitored the phone calls of at least 35 world leaders. The NSA apparently obtained these phone numbers by encouraging all government departments to share their Rolodexes with the intelligence gathering agency. But despite secretly tapping the phone calls of the world's top leaders, the memo admits that the eavesdropping program yielded very little reportable intelligence. One leader recently mentioned among those targeted by the NSA's vast eavesdropping program was German Chancellor Angela Merkel. According to the report, Merkel's own mobile phone was tapped by the NSA. This is in addition to another recent report that the NSA secretly hacked into the email account of former Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto. The Mexican government has condemned the revelations as unacceptable, illegitimate, and contrary to Mexican law and international law. Recently, when Brazil's president learned of the enormous surveillance her government and people were being subjected to by the NSA, she canceled a planned trip to Washington in protest and then used her speech at this year's United Nations General Assembly to deliver a scathing message of condemnation against the U.S. and its covert snooping operations. Another recently leaked document showed that France was heavily targeted by the NSA as well. According to a report released in the French newspaper Le Monde, the NSA recorded data from over 70 million phone calls and text messages of French citizens from December 10th, 2012 to January 8th, 2013. This is in addition to other revelations that the NSA had secretly monitored the office of the French Foreign Ministry. Additionally, Le Monde reported that the NSA intercepted over 124 billion phone calls and 97 billion computer data items globally during a one-month period in early 2013. So far, European lawmakers have responded to the recent allegations through legislative measures designed to shield citizens from online surveillance. One such proposal would require American companies like Google and Yahoo to seek clearance from European officials before complying with U.S. warrants seeking private data of European citizens. Those U.S. companies who failed to comply would face stiff fines that could reach into the billions of euros. This proposed measure, which would require the full support of the European Parliament, has already faced severe red tape through fierce U.S. lobbying pressure and intervention from British Prime Minister David Cameron. And when it was revealed that the NSA was spying on international bank transfers, including EU citizens' bank data held at the Belgian company SWIFT, the European Parliament angrily responded by passing a resolution calling for the suspension of an EU-US bank sharing data deal. But these are likely just the beginnings of the fallout that America will face from its enemies and allies over the disgraceful actions taken by the NSA. I truly believe that we have yet to see the full impact that Edward Snowden's courageous act will have upon America. But America does not quite seem to grasp just how angry the world has become over these egregious violations of national sovereignty. One example was found in a recent USA Today op-ed piece defending the NSA's vast phone tapping surveillance system, written by Chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Senator Dianne Feinstein. She claimed that the call records program was, quote, not surveillance. Former NSA contractor and whistleblower Edward Snowden immediately fired back in a recent statement claiming, quote, today, no telephone in America makes a call without leaving a record in the NSA. Today, no telephone in America makes a call without leaving a record with the NSA. Today, no internet transaction enters or leaves America without passing through the NSA's hands. Our representatives in Congress tell us this is not surveillance. They are wrong. Unquote. America's top intelligence agencies, along with the Obama administration, would have us believe that the recent NSA revelations are merely commonplace occurrences that are hardly newsworthy. After all, Obama himself has declared that all nations spy on each other. And recently, when pressed by reporters, White House Press Secretary Jay Carney stated, quote, we have made clear that the United States gathers foreign intelligence of the type gathered by all nations, unquote. Maybe so, maybe not. I think it is a bit absurd to think that other nations like Brazil and Mexico have the vast intelligence capabilities owned by the United States. And besides, America's cavalier attitude towards its clear violation of the sovereignty of other nations is embarrassing. After all, is it not the United States that has beaten its chest over the themes of liberty, freedom, democracy, and national sovereignty? In America's defense, the citizens have never quite understood the concept of blowback. That is, when you punch someone in the gut, they happen to get angry. When you drop bombs on innocent civilians in the cover of night, people get angry. When you invade other nations in the name of democracy and then leave them in worse shape than when you found them, people get angry. When you invade other people's privacy, they don't like it. It's a very simple concept that has apparently sailed right over the heads of millions of American voters, as witnessed in recent elections. Leave it to America to create millions of new enemies within former allied nations, all in a quest for increased national security. I believe that the sooner the NSA is permanently dismantled, the better. And the quicker that the American people recognize the courage displayed by Edward Snowden for standing up to the American empire, the better. Sadly, instead of confronting these issues head-on, American politicians have sought to skirt the issue or to change the topic. For example, millions of Tea Party Republicans cheered Senator Ted Cruz and others for seeking to abolish Obamacare, as they maintained full support for the NSA and America's growing police state. Meanwhile, the corporate-controlled mainstream media has attempted to convince the American people that NSA surveillance is normal. Only a handful of political journalists have done their job by confronting the Obama administration with meaningful questions over the legality of the NSA and America's growing police state. The shameful actions taken by the NSA have exposed the common virtues of blind allegiance and unbridled patriotism held by so many American citizens towards their government as a complete sham. Amazingly, there are those who will attempt to defend America's innumerable and consistent violations against the sovereignty of other nations, even as they pay lip service to the concepts of freedom and liberty. But what they fail to realize is that you cannot strip others of their sovereignty and their freedom and their democracy and expect to maintain your own. It seems that their sin is rooted in a willful ignorance of history. Somehow they have falsely believed that by permitting America's unprecedented surveillance powers to grow unchecked, they themselves will benefit from increasing levels of national security. And in the final analysis, perhaps they're right. Perhaps America truly is the first government in world history that operates out of sheer altruism. Perhaps America's only aim in spying on the entire world, including its own citizens, is simply to provide national security. But those who trust in the goodness of government do so on the basis of blind faith and against all sound historical precedent. Throughout history, those who have applauded and placed their trust in the government overreach have done so to their own peril. If history is any indication, a miscalculation of America's true intentions in its Orwellian surveillance state will carry severe repercussions. Finally, I expect future generations to look favorably upon the actions taken by Edward Snowden. I sincerely doubt that those reading the story about Edward Snowden and the NSA 100 years from now will think to themselves, gee, why didn't the American people want this Snowden guy waterboarded, locked up in an 8x8 cell, and brought out occasionally to be force-fed? No, if our progeny is any more advanced than our modern age, they will recognize the courage displayed by Edward Snowden. And if my faith in the sanity of the human race prevails, future generations will applaud America's decision to arrest and prosecute all of those involved within the NSA hierarchy to the fullest extent of the law for their treasonous actions against America and the world. Well, in case you haven't heard by now, tensions are intensifying between the world's largest net oil exporter, Saudi Arabia, and the world's lone superpower, the United States. In a series of unprecedented moves designed to provoke attention from the West, the Saudis have abruptly chosen not to deliver a scheduled address at the United Nations General Assembly, and later refused a coveted seat on the United Nations Security Council after aggressively campaigning for the position for at least a year. But it was the most recent decision by Saudi Arabia's intelligence chief, Prince Bandar bin Sultan Al Saud, to scale back cooperation with the United States on Syria that firmly established a downward spiral in U.S.-Saudi relations. According to a report by the Wall Street Journal, and I quote, Saudi Arabia's intelligence chief told European diplomats this week that he plans to scale back cooperating with the U.S. to arm and train Syrian rebels in protest of Washington's policy in the region. Prince Bandar added that the oil-rich kingdom's decision to refuse a seat on the United Nations Security Council was a message meant for the U.S., not for the UN. Now, if you're familiar with the petrodollar system that exists between the United States and Saudi Arabia and other nations like them, the news of a potential fallout in U.S.-Saudi relations should be a cause for concern. The tensions between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia, perhaps the world's oddest couple, come after several disputes over Washington's policy decisions within the Middle East. Let's briefly examine these points of tension between the two allies. First, we have Iran. Iran is Saudi Arabia's mortal enemy. The two nations have very different interpretations of Islam, and their political philosophies and views on how to govern the Middle East could not be more different. The Iranians believe that the Saudis have perverted Islam by embracing materialism and befriending the West, who they view as infidels. The Iranians, who are predominantly Shiite Muslims, openly long for a restoration of an Islamic caliphate. To this end, the Saudis have long accused the Iranians of exploiting the Shiite populations within Arab countries in order to overthrow the Sunni-controlled monarchies. Since the Islamic Revolution of 1979, Iran has been cut off from the West and viewed as an enemy. However, recent nuclear talks between the Obama administration and Iran's new leadership under President Hassan Rouhani have the Saudi royal family deeply concerned that current sanctions against Iran may be lifted soon. Even worse, the Saudis fear that Iran could once again gain international legitimacy. So far, the peace talks between Iran and the West have been productive, and another round of talks is scheduled for November. Meanwhile, the Saudis remain livid, Next, we turn to Syria. As the primary supporter of the Syrian rebels, the Saudis were greatly invested in a U.S. decision to launch airstrikes against the Assad regime back in August. In the weeks leading up to the planned airstrikes, Saudi leaders requested detailed U.S. plans to protect Saudi's vast oil fields in the eastern province from potential blowback or sabotage. But tensions began to flare when the Saudis were informed that the United States military forces had no such plans to protect the entire region. The Saudis angrily responded with a warning that the kingdom would seek other defense partners who placed a greater value on Saudi's oil supplies. Then the dispute grew even deeper when Syrian President Bashar al-Assad suddenly agreed to a peace deal brokered by Russia that included a plan to disarm the country's arsenal of chemical weapons. The Saudis were outraged when President Obama embraced the peace deal and made the decision to scrap plans to bomb Syria. According to a Saudi official statement, and I quote, "Allowing the ruling regime in Syria to kill its own people and burn them with chemical weapons in front of the entire world and without any deterrent or punishment is clear proof and evidence of the UN Security Council's inability to perform its duties and shoulder its responsibilities." U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry responded to these Saudi concerns, saying, "We know that the Saudis were obviously disappointed that the Syrian strike did not take place and had questions about some of the other things that might be happening in the region. I am convinced that we are on the same page as we are proceeding forward, and I look forward to working very closely with our Saudi friends and allies." Because the Saudis remain intent on removing Assad from power, their response was to decrease military cooperation with the U.S. while increasing their alliance with other partners in the region, including Jordan and France. And then there's Egypt. Last July, U.S.-Saudi relations were strained when the Saudis backed the Egyptian military's overthrow of the country's democratically elected leader, Mohamed Morsi. The U.S., on the other hand, provided support to President Morsi and opposed the Saudi-backed coup. In the wake of the coup, the U.S. declared it would cut foreign aid money to Egypt. The Saudis immediately shot back with an announcement that they would replace any foreign aid to Egypt that was lost as a result of the coup. Then there is the touchy subject of Bahrain. Back in 2011, U.S.-Saudi relations came under pressure when Washington failed to back the Saudis in condemning the Shiite uprising in Bahrain. Bahrain, which has a Sunni-ruled government but a Shiite majority population, is an important ally to the Saudis. The Saudis fear that the Shiite uprising in Bahrain could spill over to the rest of the Arabian Peninsula. The loyalties of the U.S., however, were divided over Bahrain, as the country's strategic location on the Persian Gulf serves as the headquarters for the Fifth Fleet of the U.S. Navy. Since 1944, the U.S. Fifth Fleet has safeguarded the Strait of Hormuz, through which 20% of the world's total oil supply passes each day. Considering that the U.S. has spent $8 trillion securing the Strait of Hormuz, the U.S. was unlikely to rock the boat with Bahrain's government. Regardless, the Saudis were angered at America's failure to provide support. And finally, there is the issue of the Israelis and the Palestinians. The Saudis have complained that the West has failed to deliver a long-awaited peace to the Israeli-Palestinian issue. The Saudis, who clearly side with the Palestinians, have become impatient towards what they view as incompetence on the part of the UN in resolving the issue. While it seems that the elusive peace between Israel and the Palestinian people may be closer than ever before, it is doubtful that the Saudis will be happy with the final outcome. But despite the sharp escalation of tensions between the U.S. and the Saudis, both countries continue to share many similar goals, and their strengths complement each other. For example, the U.S. possesses immense military might, while Saudi Arabia boasts unrivaled intelligence sources within the region. This is a potent combination amid constant instability within the Middle East, so cooperation between the two countries is likely to continue. The two countries openly share intelligence in an effort to counter terrorism in such places as Afghanistan and Yemen. For example, in 2011, the Saudis permitted the U.S. to build a secret drone base in order to launch attacks against radical elements within Yemen. But the original oil for dollars arrangement that was set up back in the 1970s is certainly becoming more brittle as the U.S. has become less dependent upon Middle East oil and as other oil-thirsty nations seek to replace the U.S. China, for example, is now the world's largest net oil importer, and much of those imports are coming from Saudi Arabia. And while it might be tempting to blame all of this on China's thirst for oil, we must remember that despite Saudi differences with the U.S., the monarchy is even at more odds with China and also Russia, as they have both strongly opposed intervention in Syria. In addition, they, along with all of the other BRICS nations, are strongly allied with Iran, whose Hezbollah militias are supporting Assad's regime against the Saudi-backed Syrian rebels. Of course, another possibility is that the recent moves by Saudi Arabia may represent deep fractures within the kingdom itself. For example, during a recent meeting in Paris between U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Saud al-Faisal, there was reportedly no mention of Prince Bandar's concerns or comments about pulling away from the United States. This could suggest internal debate within the kingdom itself on how to best handle recent policy decisions made by the U.S. In the final analysis, it seems that U.S.-Saudi relations have become less relevant in recent years as their interests appear to be diverging. After all, Saudi Arabia remains the world's #1 exporter of Wahhabi extremist jihadi Islamic terrorism, even as the U.S. claims to be fighting such terrorism. For decades, the Saudis have relied upon the U.S. to act as their mercenary in the Middle East. In exchange, the Saudis have agreed to accept only U.S. dollars for their oil and to hold most of their foreign assets in U.S. dollars, which are currently estimated to be around $700 billion. In essence, the Saudis provide us with oil and prop up our dollar in exchange for weapons and occasional military support. And if the U.S. decides that this arrangement is no longer beneficial, there are likely many other emerging nations who would love to take their place. Well, friends, that brings us to the end of our program. Thank you so much for choosing to allow me into your life each and every week. It is an honor and a privilege to be a part of yours as well. And as always, I leave you with this final word, this time found in the book of Proverbs, chapter 16, verse 16, and it says, "How much better is it to get wisdom than gold, and to get understanding rather to be chosen than silver?" Just something to think about. Remember, friends, when you want the truth, just follow the money. Have a safe and prosperous week, and I'll see you right back here next weekend. God bless.